Hello everyone, and welcome again to Jason's in the House. I'm your host, Jason Parisella, a real estate agent with Keller Williams Realty right here in Beverly. It's nice to see you again. And our guest today is Annie Minehan. She's an account executive with Atlas Glenmor Oil, and they're actually located in Chelsea, but as you'll hear more from her, some of the other territories that she covers. So welcome, Annie. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Jason.
Excellent. So as I normally do, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, how you got into the business, and then we're going to get into some real good information about that these viewers can learn about regarding heating.
Sure. Very good. Well, I've been in the business about 10 years with Atlas Glenmor, and we are one of the largest fuel oil providers in the state, and we do cover from the New Hampshire border to the Cape Cod Canal to about 20 miles this side of Worcester. And we have a very large concentration in the North Shore area. A lot of people are familiar with the name Glenmor Oil.
Yeah.
And it's been, a great experience, great company. We're open 24 hours a day, every day of the year, so very customer focused.
So how did you get involved with, what's your background? Are you?
My background has been in sales and
okay.
also with customer service, so the two go together well because customer service is very important in taking care of people's, home energy and, home heating and comfort needs.
Right. So let's get into, there's a lot of different topics around heating systems this time of the year, and air conditioning, things like that.
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that I see as a realtor is this whole oil line upgrade.
Yes.
Legislation. Can you explain that so the homeowners can really understand what this all means to them?
Sure. What they discovered was that oil was getting into contaminating the groundwater through oil lines that were actually put in the concrete flooring in a lot of people's homes. That's how they used to do them, to kind of hide them. And what the legislation called for is those oil lines to be taken out of the concrete and put in a protective casing. And I have a sample here.
Yeah, let's go and show that while you can be talking while we show the...
Sure. And here the oil line is still going to be copper.
So let's get to see if we can, okay, so we can see, make sure they see how that's it's got that plastic covering.
It's still copper, and then it has this plastic covering on it, and this is what is considered up to code.
Okay.
And so what would be done is that when we go into a home that has the copper line in the concrete flooring, is we cut the tubing at the point where it goes into the flooring at both the oil tank end as well as the boiler end. We remove the oil in that tubing and then cap it off so that it's actually left in the concrete, because you're not going to necessarily dig up the concrete.
So what do they just suck the oil out of the...
Mm-hmm. Correct. Correct.
So this is okay, this plastic tubing
this is totally acceptable.
Can go in concrete, or you have to have it
This would not go in concrete. It would stay typically around the flooring, and in some homes it has to, by the town code, go over the the ceiling and the rafter joints in the basement.
I've seen that quite a bit, and I was always wondering, what's the reason behind that it has to go up like that and over?
It may be, again, due to the distance between the tank and the boiler,
I see.
Or if it's considered indirect foot traffic, so that you don't want somebody to trip over it.
Okay. Now, I think I've seen, and may be wrong, blue, is there a blue?
There's a blue one that is
considered... Does that go over this plastic one? Or is the blue one
would be considered also acceptable. This is the newer, kind of more improved version. These have been out for probably about 3 years now, and it's only really been law for just under 2 years. And it's something that's very important. What they were doing is putting something called an oil safety valve on the oil line, which is also acceptable. It's not as good a preventative measure as upgrading your actual oil line, though.
So if you have that safety valve, that's per code now?
It's
and you
considered
don't have to
acceptable. It's considered acceptable.
Now, when does this all get triggered? I mean, when does a homeowner actually, I understand that homeowners should be doing this, in my opinion, probably now, because you don't want to have an oil leak.
Exactly.
And the only way to do it is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Correct.
Is to do this.
Very often we find that in that transaction, when people are having their home inspected, which I'm sure that you're very familiar with, that inspection process and the inspector will pick that up and bring it to the homeowner's attention.
So then at that point, they're not legal. Is there anything legally, well, if it's the code, then it's legally you're supposed to, but there really isn't any trigger other than maybe you're going to sell them, there's a home inspection.
Exactly, but something also that when we go into a customer's home and do, let's say, a tune-up, or there may be a unscheduled service call, an emergency service call, and we happen to see that, and it's a new customer, and this may be the first time that we've been in their basement,
Right.
then we would bring it to their attention and make a recommendation that they do bring it up to code, because often homeowners aren't aware of this,
Yeah.
or it may not have been brought to their attention previously.
And I've actually heard some, and you know, really through being a realtor, some recent cases where oil has been leaking for
Yes.
many
Right,
years.
many years.
Underneath, coming right, like you
Exactly.
just said, this is under the concrete.
Exactly.
It was leaking in, nobody knew, you can't see it leaking.
Correct.
But once it leaks, that's a whole different,
It is.
You're
Then you
talking-
have an environmental problem, and that, you know, that's a good point. Is that at that point you would need to then hopefully have had some kind of protection either through your homeowner's policy, and there aren't a lot of insurance companies that will provide that coverage. We happen to provide what's called CARE, C-A-R-E, for cleanup of an accidental release to the environment, because it is very costly to have the DEQE come in and also to do the digging up of one's backyard
Right,
where the
right.
leaking is, and the different regulations and requirements. You have to have the clean soil down a certain amount.
so you're saying that your company gets involved with doing the actual cleanup?
Correct. Well, what we do is we then we provide the insurance.
Oh, I see,
So
the
that
insurance.
the
Okay, that's the
homeowner
name of
can
that
then
was the insurance.
purchase, you know, so that they get the cleanup. and
I
the
see. So
environmental.
there is insurance that you would provide
Yes,
to protect them on spills.
correct.
Or,
Correct. And it's under $100 a year, and you get $100,000 worth of coverage.
that
And
seems
so-
pretty, yeah, that
yeah,
seems
it's very reasonable.
probably worth it, anybody that has oil heat.
Yes, yes. And certainly if it's an older home
Yeah.
and it hasn't been recently upgraded, certainly the oil line, or maybe something that people are renovating. And you know, as you know, in this area on the North Shore, there's some beautiful old, you know, stately homes, sea captains' homes, and what may get their attention are the architectural details,
Right.
and they don't necessarily think of the, you know, more kind of the guts of the home.
Yeah.
So the plumbing, the heating, and those kinds of things.
How long do you think it would take, I don't know if you know the time frame of actually copper being in cement and concrete, and how long it takes for that to typically start corroding to a point where the oil's leaking out? Is there any type of...
There's no real time frame, Jason. Again, some of it would depend on the actual concrete composition. Yeah, there's different types
So
of
there's a lot of different
concrete.
variables.
Exactly. And the ingredients that go in it. And then also the basement conditions, the ground soil conditions, all those factors that...
One other thing too I just thought of is does a line typically leak, or does a tank leak? Which one would more
Which
likely
one would
leak?
leak more? Well, I would think probably a tank would leak more likely than the line, because
the
the
line.
tank has more of the exposure, and it, you know, from the oil fill where we fill it, you know, because there's always two pipes. You have a vent pipe, which is where the air comes out,
Yeah.
but also moist air during the winter and summer can go in there, and that moisture mixing with the oil can again degrade the tank, because the oil tanks do degrade from the inside out.
So the other thing I just thought of too is I've seen a lot of these homes, depending on, for example, a home that doesn't have a basement. There's
Right.
nowhere to put the tank.
Correct.
So they'll
Put it in
dig
the
a hole.
garage.
Now, first of all, that's not legal anymore to just dig a hole.
It is not. You can't.
Can you even
Underground
put one in
tanks.
Can you even put one in legally into
No,
the
you
ground?
cannot. No, you cannot
So you
install
have to have an oil
underground
tank. Has to be above ground now.
Correct. Just for that reason, because you know the exposure and the risk, and you can't see the leak.
Yeah. So they were
So-
putting them in the ground. Now, were the original tanks, or not even the original, but when they were in the ground, or the typical older tank, is it how many? Is it one layer, or is it two?
Again, it would
You know what I'm
depend on the
saying?
manufacturer. There's typically two different thickness. There'd be a 10 gauge, 12 gauge, and you do see 14 gauge tanks out
But is it
there.
one big piece of metal though, or is it a piece of metal and then another piece of metal around? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, correct. It's typically, again, it would be the two fabricated pieces of metal.
Now, is there any type of, permit? What do you want to call it? Regulations on do you have to have a double, that's what the word I was looking
On
for,
the
double-walled
double-walled tank.
Does
Well,
it have to be double-walled or it can be single-walled?
It could be single-walled, and there is something called a Roth tank, R-O-T-H, again, which is a double-walled tank, but you don't see those underground.
Right.
And those are a very, very good tank, and it almost protects you for the life, for your life.
So you have
against
options
leaking.
to what tank you want to get.
Absolutely.
But there's probably a certain minimum standard that you have to.
Correct. Exactly. And certainly because of the environmental awareness
Right.
and what the manufacturing, codes and standards are to try and prevent that, exposure to the environment and reduce that risk.
Right. What are the chances of a tank actually like completely letting go on the bottom? I mean, have you ever run into anything like?
We have, and unfortunately, it has happened. It does happen, and again, it's going to be an older tank that maybe has not been well, cared for. Maybe the conditions in the basement
Right.
have not been conducive to extending the life of a tank. If it's been a very moist basement,
Yeah.
and if it's if it's got only a little bit of oil, and then you go and you put in 250 gallons, the weight of that oil, then
Could really.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm assuming all this, a good oil company's going to really keep an eye on all this stuff. So they're not filling tanks that are
Correct,
older or that.
correct. And inspecting them, and
Right.
that's something that's very important. And what we're able to provide folks is something called Tank Sure. And it's really a proactive approach, and that's what we're saying here too is proactively rather than reacting to the the damage and the ensuing cost of it. If you can do it ahead of time and make educated decisions
Right.
and change things so that you can eliminate that. And
Yeah.
what we offer is something called Tank Sure, and this is very similar to what they do in the medical field. This was actually developed by Boston Environmental, and it's an actual ultrasound kit about the size of a thick cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we actually measure.
Maybe turn it up a little bit that way.
Sure.
Yeah. Still a bit of an
Something
angle,
there,
yeah.
there. And what we do is actually measure the thickness of the metal in the tank. And we know whether it's a 10, 12, or 14 gauge tank. And by doing that, we're able to tell with over 90% accuracy if that tank is at risk of leaking in the next 12 months.
I
So
see.
if you had a prospective buyer and they weren't familiar with heating oil as their source of heat, and they were, let's say, maybe moving from a gas home, they might want to consider having the tank inspected just for that reason. And we do
Right.
it as a courtesy for new homeowners, and we can share with them, this tank is is not at risk of leaking. You can feel comfortable and confident that it's not going to be leaking, and you can enjoy your home
Right.
without having that worry on your shoulder.
So it's going to detect maybe an area that's actually less of a, like the
Correct.
bottom of the tank might be,
Exactly.
thinner than the top of the tank because it's starting
Exactly.
to wear out.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
we check about 10 or 12 different spots, Jason, on the bottom of the tank. And it's not on the true bottom. It's out about 4 to 6 inches on there. And again, this is the actual device that is used, and
So
it
that goes
measures
right-
it right up against the bottom of the tank.
I see.
Correct. Flat and flush. And that
And it's
will
gonna
give you
give
the
you-
actual reading and indication based on what the original gauge is of the tank.
Okay.
And to get a baseline, you're absolutely correct. What we do is we measure 3 spots on the top of the tank, because oil really never reaches the tippy top of the tank, and there really is virtually no degradation in the quality of the metal from when it was first installed. So we use that as a baseline. And then we go to the bottom of the tank, and this will tell us what the actual degradation is of the metal.
Right, so you'll be able to tell basically probably the original gauge and then
Exactly.
what's on the bottom, yeah.
Exactly. Now, what we've done for customers, because this is the 4th year for a lot of our customers when we first started this program, and we keep a database so we can see year after year how that erosion, the amount that is taking place every year, and then we can swap out the tank proactively rather than waiting for it to leak.
Right.
If we're seeing that it's degrading 2.02 milliliters every year, then we're going to know, geez, in 2 years, we really should install a new oil tank.
Are people generally putting in the double wall tanks or a single wall?
No, most single are putting in, because you're going to be able to typically get 20 to 25 years out of a tank.
All right, so that's the average life expectancy
Correct.
of a tank, 20,
Correct.
25 years.
And you can go with a $1,000 warranty, which we offered, you know, as that would be your minimum, and then the other one would be what we call total tank replacement, which is about $2,500, and that's an average cost.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
to replace it.
So when we kind of talked about this already, so when they upgrade the line, obviously you mentioned
Yes.
they take the oil out, you can keep that line in the basement floor.
Correct.
You're just going to bring a new one up,
Exactly.
detach that one and leave
Correct.
it there.
And any time that we replace an oil tank, we have to also replace the oil line. Again, that's part of the Massachusetts
Okay.
you know, rules and regulations.
So with this type of system, do you still have that safety valve on there?
Some people do have both. Again,
You don't
because
have to
that
have
would-
both?
You don't have to have both, but again, this is a better way to keep,
Right.
you know, your property and your home, you know, not at risk
Yeah.
of having the oil leak there. So-
Okay. We talked about the tank insurance.
Correct.
Anything else on
Correct.
that we need to touch on to make sure that people are covered on their tanks? And
Just that it's something that they should, you know, consider. There are other options out there that are not something that we utilize. That being, some people, there's a can. You know, I remember doing it as a teenager, adding it to my radiator to try. It's supposed to be heavier than water, and it would sink to the bottom and supposedly fill in those holes. As
I
a
see.
company, we don't use that. We don't feel that that is the proper or really a thorough way of taking care of your oil tank. This way we can proactively replace it.
Right.
And this gives a much more accurate indication of where and how far the erosion is taking place on the inside of the tank.
okay. All right. So this has always been a debate. Everybody always, you know, wonders, well, should I have oil? Should I have gas? And another part of this whole conversation is propane.
Correct.
So what do you tell people? I mean, it's
Well, very often
I guess
it's,
I know there's pluses and minuses, and
right. And sometimes it's just a matter of personal preference or, you know, what may be available. Certainly,
which is
you
true.
know,
So if this gas isn't on the street, actually you can always get propane brought in, I would imagine.
exactly, exactly.
But if the gas isn't coming from the street, your only option is the propane or the
or
oil.
the oil, correct. And it's one of the things where some people have a preference, you know, one for the other. Basically, you know, we're able to service, you know, either a gas boiler or furnace, an oil boiler or furnace, because the equipment is basically the same. It's just a different fuel source.
I see.
And the same thing with if you use propane as your fuel source, the equipment that's going to heat or cool your home is basically the same.
Now, is there any are there any major difference between propane and gas?
Propane,
Gas coming from the street?
right, exactly. And propane is always in a contained, you know, well, it's on-site, but it's outside.
That's a tank too.
Correct.
But it's just a different.
Exactly, different
I mean,
size.
you always, you know, you hear gas you hear, oil you hear about leaks.
Right.
Gas you hear about explosions.
Explosions. Exactly, exactly.
So I guess people wonder which one. And I know a lot of people from being a realtor, they do not want gas. They just,
It's because of
because
the
of the
explosion.
explosions,
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, you can even in a 5-gallon drum of oil, you can throw a lit match, and the match is going to go out because it's the oxygen in your furnace or your boiler. It's the oxygen that comes through the nozzle, and as the nozzle sprays the oil, it's the oxygen that ignites, and then the oil just is the fuel source.
I see.
So, but in and of itself, it is not a flammable source, and it's actually biodegradable.
What, the actual oil? I'm sorry,
The
I missed
actual
the beginning.
oil.
The oil in the tank. So you can put a match in the tank?
Yeah, it won't light.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's very. I guess
Isn't that
that's a
interesting?
good point to have oil, not have gas.
Yeah.
So you put that's a very good safety feature. One of the other
Exactly.
things I guess is you can fully control as long as you. I mean, I think from my perspective, from what I see, people don't pay attention to their oil lines, or they don't know, and they
Right.
don't pay attention to their
Exactly.
tank. And if you pay attention to those things, seems like you've got a pretty safe system if you have oil.
Absolutely. And also one of the security things is if you're dealing with a full-service automatic delivery company, you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And we come automatically based on the weather, based on your lifestyle. If you use it just for heat versus heat and water.
Yeah.
If you have a 2,000 square foot home versus a 5,000 square foot home. We have a very sophisticated state-of-the-art system that will track your deliveries and your consumption. So that you have that security, you don't have to worry about running out of oil. And if you go away for 2 or 3 weeks on vacation and you turn your thermostat down and, you know, let's say for some reason you decide to stay an extra week or two, again, we keep track of that also. So
which is another point with the oil. Obviously you have to make sure it gets delivered and you have a reliable company delivering it and things like that. So there are definitely some differences. Propane, I would imagine, is generally used when there's no gas on the street coming in. People, for some reason, don't want to have oil. And they can go to the propane.
Exactly. Now, you see in this area, though, most people use it for supplemental sources, for their fireplace. Some people use it for cooking, if they happen to prefer gas cooking versus electric. Yeah. And also often for dryers. So it's a very good, reliable source.
You can still have oil heat. Mm-hmm. And then if you want to have a gas dryer and a gas stove, you can get a propane tank.
Exactly.
So
that's great.
So anything else on the gas versus oil or points of difference?
Again,
or do you? I think you. Does your company deal with propane also?
We do.
Okay,
we very much do. Correct. We deal with all 3 fuel sources: gas, oil,
so you'll service
and
any type of system.
Absolutely.
Anything else on that? Yeah, I mean, one of the other things is the oil. Everybody's wondering about the oil prices.
Right.
Now I've heard. I have no idea if this is even. Remember where I heard it, but recently I've heard that gas is unbelievably plentiful right now.
It is.
That doesn't. I don't think it necessarily reflects in the price.
It does not.
Which I'm not sure what's going on with that.
I don't know that the same is true for oil.
I guess is what you're saying. There's abundance of oil.
Yeah, we're not at a.
You always wonder what. So then you get these things going on in the middle of winter. People get afraid of oil because my price is going to go way up and things like that.
As you know, I mean, we live in a global society now, and there are a lot of non-oil related factors that don't relate to supply and demand that affect oil prices, as people know and experienced back in 2008 when prices went through the roof. I mean, it got up to $135 a barrel, and then within 90 days it was back down to $50. So there's a lot of volatility to the market, and unfortunately that's just the world that we live in right now relative to that. One of the nice things also is that people can choose to go on a price protection plan. Yeah,
I was going to mention that, so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, and that's
whether you would recommend that or not with people.
Yeah,
you do?
I definitely would.
So that locks it in for?
It does. It does for 12 months. And what we're able to do is provide protection 12 months a year. It doesn't matter whether it's the middle of August, the middle of February. Some companies only offer it to their customers during a finite period, maybe the last 2 weeks of August or the first 2 weeks of September. And again, that's something that people definitely want to be aware of.
Yeah, so when do you have to lock in the price?
Again, it depends on the company. We're able to provide it to our customers any day of the year. You can call whether it's August or January. It's a matter of whatever the price is that particular day. Some of the other small local companies are only able to do it a couple weeks out of the year, and this is typically around the time when people start thinking about it.
Right. Okay. Bioheat.
Yes.
I don't know too much about it. I have happened to see it, and I wanted to ask you what is bioheat and what's...
Well, it's a blend of biodiesel and heating oil, and it's a great renewable source. There had been some legislation put forth a couple of years ago, back in 2010, so that on a graduated basis by 2012, all oil distributors would have to have at least a 2% blend. Then it would graduate to a 3% blend, up to a 5% blend. And we've been delivering about a 4% blend for about the past 4 or 5 years anyway. But I'm confident in that any oil distributor is delivering at least a 2% blend now, because it is blended at the depot, which is where all the companies pick up their oil.
So it's rare to not find blended oil?
Exactly.
Now you said it'll go up to about 5%?
Correct.
Now, what will
Correct.
not make, why wouldn't it go to up higher than that? Is it just because you can't just, can you burn just straight biodiesel? Or can you?
You can, but it's not going to burn as efficiently.
I see.
And one of the nice things about it is that when you have a blend, it does burn cleaner through your system. It's better for the environment because you don't have as many emissions.
Yeah.
And it's something that people can do, a green thing that people can do.
Right.
We don't charge extra for ours. I know there are other companies that do charge a premium for their biofuel and biodiesel.
So is yours automatically in there? You said
Yes.
4%?
Yes.
Okay, and it's
Well,
the same price?
It's at least 2%.
Two,
It's at
okay,
least
so 2 to 4. Okay.
So if people specify it with us, Jason, we know that it's going to be at least a 2%.
Okay.
But if it's not something that people feel strongly about, and they just, just heating oil, they're going to get probably at least 2%.
Right. Okay. Energy audits, that kind of goes along with our conversation about, where do you, what does someone do to get an energy audit?
The best thing for them to do is to go on to masssave.com, and they will offer free energy assessment on how people can best kind of buttonhole their home where they might be losing energy, whether it's doors, windows, insulation. And also on that website, it will share with them what rebates are available for installing and upgrading more energy efficient heating equipment, even air conditioning equipment. And I believe there's they have a special 0% interest rate right now, up to $25,000. So
wow.
if you, it's
there
quite
are a lot
an
of nice
incentive.
incentives and
There
rebates
really
and
are.
things
There
like
really
that.
are. And it's a great organization. They really offer an awful lot, to your clients, to our customers,
Right.
to help save, in their fuel and energy costs. And it's something that's become, people are much more aware of it.
Yeah. Okay. We just have a couple minutes left.
Sure.
Just touch upon anything you're seeing with, there's so many different types of heating systems, the air conditioning. What are you seeing for some new things that are going on, or some things that you've been dealing with that are maybe more
Sure.
efficient, or things that you feel like might be a trend or anything like
Right.
that?
Well, one of the things is to say that people do want to consider is upgrading their heating and their air conditioning systems because of the incentives, not just through MassSave, but from the different manufacturers. The initial investment is, worth it. They're getting additional savings in their interest and in their loans, and then you would be saving also on the fuel itself, because on average, you're going to be saving probably around 25% in your fuel consumption.
Usage, right, because of these newer, more
exactly, on
efficient
the newer
systems.
equipment.
Which one is the most efficient system?
It's tough to say. Each manufacturer is going
It
to
all
say
has-
differently,
yeah.
and also how it's configured and utilized and installed in your home. It's very important that it's properly installed,
Yeah.
and that you have the right plumbing, the right piping, the right ductwork, and whatever is required. And that's something again that we're able to provide customers, because we have specific technicians. All they do are install these systems,
Right.
and they're familiar with the nuances of a particular brand or what the recommended.
Yeah, so you can give someone the pros and cons of each
Exactly.
different
The other
option.
thing that I actually installed, at my house we had added an addition, and we don't have a full basement. It's called a mini split, and it's an air conditioning unit, but you can also add to it what would be called a heat pump, and I use it 12 months a year, and it gets installed on the wall.
I see.
So that you don't need to have ductwork installed there, and it's great. It's a lot less money, and it can heat quite a large area.
Much easier install.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And you have the air
it-
conditioning too, yeah.
Correct. And for somebody that, as I say, doesn't have a basement, doesn't have space for ductwork, or doesn't want to take away closet space, because often you would use part of a closet to put in
Right.
ductwork.
Right. Excellent. So if anybody has some really good information, anybody want to get a hold of you to any questions for you at all or anything at all, why don't you just give us your contact
The best
info.
thing to do, we have our 800 number, 800-433-1616, and then our website is www.agmoil.com, and you can also look us up on Facebook.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That was very
Thank you.
helpful. And
Thank
we
you.
may have to have you on again. We'll see, to talk a little bit more about
Great.
all the stuff that we just talked
Super.
about.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. So thank you again, everybody, for joining me at Jason's in the House. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions or comments for me, you can visit my website, which is jasonparisellateam.com. and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.